My dad kicked me out of the house for my golden half-brother, but 6 months later, they're begging me to lie to cover up a crime, or they'll go to jail. I'm a guy and I turned 18 about 4 months ago. My father kicked me out of the house half a year ago because my half-brother Derek, 24 years old, decided to live there. He didn't want to rent a place like a normal adult, but wanted to live with my dad. For context, Derek is my father's son from his first marriage, but his mother and my father broke up soon after he was born. Derek has a much closer relationship with my dad than with his mom. So, when we were kids, we spent a lot of time together because he came to our house more often than he was supposed to according to the custody agreement. I'm pretty sure he was supposed to live half the month with my dad, but I remember him being with us all the time. Or maybe my mind is exaggerating it because I hated hanging out with him, but my dad made me. I also know for sure that Derek didn't like me either and saw me as a threat. My mom died a couple of years ago after a long fight with lung cancer, and that's when things between me and my dad started getting worse. Don't get me wrong, things were always bad between us, even when I was little. I think my dad just didn't want a kid like me. Maybe he didn't want kids at all. Either way, he treated me weirdly as a child, and I almost always felt like he didn't want me around. He was always angry at me, yelling at me for the smallest things. He never showed any affection, and even when I tried to earn his approval, all I got was coldness. But with Derek, he was a completely different person. When Derek was around, my dad suddenly became the best father in the world. He did everything with Derek that I always wanted him to do with me. He made us spend time together, even though we both clearly made it obvious that we couldn't stand each other. Derek didn't like me because he saw me as a threat, and I couldn't stand him because he always bullied me when I was a kid. He'd always argue with me, shove me, just because he could. He knew he'd get away with it, because my dad would never say a word against him. Every time I complained to my father that Derek was being mean to me, he'd tell me to toughen up and deal with it, because, in his words, it's how boys are supposed to play, and he didn't want me to grow up weak. I thought that's what my dad wanted from me, so eventually I learned to tolerate it and just let them treat me that way. I never fought back against Derek because I didn't want to make my father angry. And I knew that getting into conflict with my brother was a sure way to make him yell at me, no matter who was actually at fault. If I fought with Derek, I was always the bad guy. My dad never cared about what really happened. Whatever went wrong, I was the problem. It was painfully obvious that my dad had a favorite, and it wasn't me. It didn't bother him one bit that Derek bullied me, even though he was 6 years older. Later, Derek started changing the way he bullied me because simple physical fights stopped working. He was getting older too, and when he went to high school, he started mocking me along with his friends. Before that, school had been a safe place for me because I was still in elementary school when he was in middle school, and we were in different buildings. So he couldn't reach me there. But when I moved up to middle school, we ended up in the same building, and he, along with his friends, began constantly bullying and harassing me. They even spread stupid, disgusting rumors about me, like that I was mentally slow. All the older kids knew me as Derek's dumb little brother. I'm not joking, that's literally what they called me. They also called me all sorts of other insulting names, and that made my life way harder. Because when you get to middle school, you start to care more about your reputation. Even the few friends I had in elementary school stopped talking to me because I wasn't cool enough to hang out with them. Only when Derek graduated high school, I was finally able to feel at peace. I still had a few friends, but most people believed what was being said about me, and I let them, because I was so exhausted from constantly fighting that I didn't even have the energy to argue anymore. Things at home were just as bad as always, because Derek and my dad never missed a chance to humiliate me and make me feel like an idiot. And the funniest thing was, I wasn't an idiot at all. I had pretty decent grades, and I was good at math and science and things like that, but my dad and Derek didn't care. Derek was a football player, and what made it worse, he was also a really good student. So you can imagine what it was like for me at home. Derek was everything I wasn't. Athletic, successful in school, and exactly the kind of son my dad wanted. I, on the other hand, was average in every possible way. They never missed a chance to remind me how insignificant and ordinary I was. My mom tried to protect me most of the time, but my dad always managed to twist things around and convince her that they were just joking and didn't mean anything bad. My mom was, generally, a kind and sweet woman, but she was also truly in love with my father, so she never saw who he really was. She did her best to stand up for me, and I was grateful for that, but it just wasn't enough. My father and Derek kept tormenting me however they could. Finally, Derek left for college and I felt like I could finally breathe. My dad still gave me a hard time, but it was much easier to deal with him when that jerk was far away. But before I could even get used to what it was like living without Derek constantly attacking me, my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was incredibly hard for us to accept. It felt like our world had collapsed. The only thing my dad and I had in common was that we both loved my mom very much, and her diagnosis truly broke us both. But instead of making our family stronger, my dad chose to make everything worse. My mom was suffering so much, and instead of us supporting her together and showing her that we were holding on, he started distancing himself from me even more. Before, at least he used to talk to me, even if it was mostly sarcasm or mockery, but after my mom's diagnosis, he stopped doing even that and began pretending that I didn't exist at all. I can justify him a little because we were both in pain and he just chose a different way to deal with it. But I still wish that what happened to my mom could have brought us closer somehow. Obviously, that didn't happen. And even if it could have, my father is the kind of person who would have done everything possible to prevent it. For some reason, he just hated me and couldn't stand the thought of me being happy. As time went on, my mom's condition kept getting worse, and my father's behavior affected me more and more. He would either completely ignore me, not speaking to me at all, or he'd be extremely cruel. There were a few times when his behavior almost made me cry. I tried my best to keep peace in the family by not reacting to him, because I knew that if I started responding, he would just find even more reasons to yell at me and pick fights. During the years my mom was sick, whenever Derek came home from college, he didn't bother me. And for that, I was thankful. He still wasn't kind to me, but at least he acted like a human being, and that was more than I ever expected from him. When my mom was still alive, things were bad, but after her death, I went through hell. In the first couple of months after she died, the house was eerily quiet, and by that, I mean that I did all the housework while my father was completely detached. He functioned, went to work, came home, ate dinner, but nothing more. I was a little worried about him, and even called my grandparents several times to tell them I thought my dad might be depressed, but they didn't take me seriously. Neither of them cared enough about their son to visit him after the funeral, or maybe, just like my father, they didn't like me and didn't want to do, but a few months later, my father started going back to his usual self. Unfortunately, that included drinking binges and making me feel worthless again. He constantly ordered me to do things around the house, and it was exhausting because I not only went to school but also did all the housework that my mom used to handle, even when she was sick. Before, my dad and I used to take care of things together, but after her death, all the responsibility fell on me. I couldn't even protest because whenever I tried to, my dad would tell me that since I didn't bring any money into the house, the least I could do was work around it if I wanted to live there. It was humiliating, but I had nowhere else to go, so I just endured it. For a long time, the only thing I looked forward to was getting into college, because that meant I could finally get away from my father and never have to come back. Besides, after my mom passed away, that place stopped feeling like home. Of course, I could have moved in with my mom's parents after her death, but they lived very far away and I still had a year of school left, so that wasn't an option. Then, a couple of months ago, when my father found out that his golden child was planning to move back in, he kicked me out anyway. So in the end, I did move in with my grandparents. Derek had gone to college a few years earlier and hadn't come back to live there since. After graduating, he found a job and decided to stay in that city because his girlfriend wanted to settle down and build her life away from home. So Derek decided to stay with her and only visited during holidays. About 2 years ago, he married his girlfriend because she got pregnant. They had just finished college when they found out she was expecting, and they decided to get married. Surprisingly, I was invited to the wedding, and that day, Derek didn't say a single bad word to me. My mom also attended the wedding, despite her condition, because even if Derek didn't like it, everyone loved my mom. He didn't have much of a relationship with his own mother since she was, to put it mildly, not the best parent. She didn't care about Derek at all. By the time of his wedding, she was already on her 4th marriage, and honestly, it seemed like her main goal in life was wealth. She worked and earned good money, no doubt about that, but she did it at the cost of her relationship with her son. I think that's why Derek was so attached to our father. Basically, he had only one parent who truly cared about him, and of course he didn't want to share that parent with me. Anyway, Derek got married and soon had a baby. They lived happily in another city for the past 2 years, but for some reason, 6 months ago, they decided to move back. My dad just told me about it 2 weeks before Derek was supposed to arrive. He looked so smug when he said it. One day, he sat me down and told me that I needed to find a place to live because Derek was coming home, and I had to clear out my room. We had 3 bedrooms, so I asked why they couldn't just use the guest room. He said that Derek and his wife would live in the guest room, and my room would become the baby's nursery. According to him, it was extremely important that I leave because I had already lived there long enough, and since I was turning 18 soon, it was time for me to move out. It seemed selfish for my father to demand that I leave the house just because he wanted to live there with his family. I tried to argue with him, but it was pointless. He had already made up his mind. He told me I had 2 weeks to move out, and if I didn't, he would call the police. Now, I realized there probably was some legal way to fight him and stop what was happening. But back then, it didn't even occur to me. I was terrified because I didn't trust my father and knew he was fully capable of throwing me out without warning. So I started frantically searching for a place to stay, but in the end, I just decided to move in with my grandparents. I had avoided that option before because they lived too far away, and I still had to go to school. But at that point, I simply had no other choice. Besides, there were only a couple of weeks left before graduation, so I was ready to go for it. A few days later, I had already moved out because I didn't want to be there when Derek came back home with his wife and baby. My father didn't seem to care that I was leaving. He didn't even say goodbye. The day I packed my things and was getting ready to leave with the movers, my grandparents arrived in their truck to pick me up. They were furious and ready to confront my dad, but I asked them not to because it just wasn't worth it. It's been 6 months since then, and all this time I've been living with my grandparents. I haven't spoken to my father since he kicked me out, and I had no intention of ever contacting him again. In a couple of weeks, I was supposed to start college, and I had absolutely no desire to ever talk to my father or Derek again. But unfortunately, they were the ones who ended up reaching out to me, because something happened, and now they needed me to save their asses. They visited me a few days ago, and I was genuinely surprised because I didn't expect them to ever try to contact me. My grandparents still let them into the house, and I decided to talk to them because they looked truly desperate. I found out that the reason Derek and his family had moved back in the first place was because he lost his job and could no longer afford rent. So he made the tough decision to return home. His wife wasn't against it since she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom until their baby got a bit older. So for them it seemed like the best option. When they came back, they expected to find work easily, but that turned out to be far from true. Literally, none of the local companies were hiring, and there were plenty of people with the same qualifications as Derek, so he didn't stand out among other candidates. Somehow, though, my father managed to get him a job at the same company where he worked. Derek wasn't happy about the new job because his salary was a bit lower than what he earned before. But it was the only place willing to hire him, so he had to accept it. But, as it turned out, Derek had been stealing money from the company for several months, and a few weeks ago it all came to light. Now my father and Derek were in deep trouble because their employer believed they were working together and threatened to sue them if they didn't pay the money back soon. The only reason they hadn't been sued yet was because the company's CEO had been a good friend of my mom's. Out of respect for her, he hadn't filed charges against them yet, but that wouldn't last much longer. My father and Derek wanted me to help them. They wanted me to say that they took the money because they needed it to pay for my college tuition, not for personal gain. My father believed that this would make the CEO more sympathetic and give them some extra time to return the money. They'd still get fired, but at least they wouldn't end up in jail. They were counting on me to play the role of a poor victim of circumstance. I couldn't believe their nerve that they actually had the audacity to ask me for such a thing after how they'd treated me my whole life. I refused almost immediately without even thinking because it was a ridiculous idea and I was sure it wouldn't work. Their plan was completely absurd and I wanted nothing to do with it. When I told them I didn't want to be part of their crime, they started getting really nervous and said that I owed it to them because there was a real chance they could go to prison and I couldn't let some petty grudge from the past ruin their lives. I told them it wasn't some petty grudge and definitely not something from the past. My father had kicked me out not even a year ago, so I'd say it was a pretty fresh wound. But even that wasn't the main reason I refused to help them, was simply because I thought it would be unfair. Besides, I personally knew the man my father worked for. As I already mentioned, my mom and this man were really good friends, and he seemed to like me too. He and my mom practically grew up together, and I used to call him Uncle when he came over while my mom was still alive. We even had a pleasant conversation at her funeral. To tell the truth, it was actually my mom who asked him to give my father a job at his company when he was struggling. But instead of being grateful, Derek decided to deceive these people. And now my father is trying to cover it all up and use me as a shield. I thought it was extremely low to be part of that deception. So I told my father and brother that it would be better for them to just try to return the money they stole instead of making up even more lies. They could end up in jail if they tried to deceive their boss again. In fact, they should be thankful that they were even given the chance to simply return the money and get out of this situation without a lawsuit, because they would definitely lose in court, which would destroy their future. They were absolutely facing prison time, and they didn't even realize how much worse everything would get if they decided to go through with their stupid plan. I tried to explain this to them, but my father got angry and said that he didn't come for a lecture, but for help. He said that if I wanted to help, I should agree with their plan instead of giving useless advice. Then I told him that I wasn't going to take part in it, and to my surprise, my father started crying. I had never seen his tears before, and it made me feel extremely uncomfortable. My father told me that he was counting on me because, after all, I was his son, and no matter what happened in the past, he knew he would help me if I were in a similar situation. He said he expected the same from me because he was in serious trouble and really didn't want to go to prison. Derek also begged me to help them because he knew that my mom's friends liked me and that I was the only one who could save them. My mom would have handled this situation much easier, but since she's gone, I became the next person they could rely on. It was hard, but I still had to refuse and try to convince them to just admit their guilt and return the money they stole. They got very upset and said that the only reason I didn't want to help was because they made my life miserable when I was a kid. They said they were disappointed in me. My father and Derek left, but I keep thinking about it, and the guilt is eating me alive because I can't stop imagining them in prison. Honestly, it makes me feel terrible. But at the same time, I don't want to be part of something illegal and so immoral. That would be an insult to my mother's memory, because essentially I'd be using her friendship. And I don't know what to do, and time is running out. So, am I a bad person for not wanting to lie and cover for my father and stepbrother, who bullied me my whole life? So let's answer that question in the comments, and now let's move on to the update. Update 1. I've made my decision, and I think I'll stick with it, not helping my father and brother. It's not only immoral and unethical, but also blatantly illegal. So if my father and Derek want to avoid prison, they'll have to deal with their problems themselves. Besides, they were given the chance to fix everything, to return all the money Derek stole and get out of this situation without ruining their reputation. They can return the money and solve their problems on their own, so I have no reason to feel guilty. Most commenters suggested that I shouldn't get involved, not just because my father and Derek are terrible people, but also because what they did was truly awful. My conscience wouldn't let me live as easily as they could. Clearly, we have different moral principles, and I wouldn't want to be involved in something like that. That's exactly why I chose to stay away, and if my father or brother ever try to contact me again, I'll block them. For the record, they're already blocked everywhere, but I'm sure they could use different numbers or social media accounts to reach me. My grandparents also think I'm doing the right thing because they're the ones who created this mess, and now they have to deal with it. Expecting anything from me after the way they treated me is just pointless. Update 2. Today my father reached out to me through a message. As I expected, it's been 8 days since he last visited me and we hadn't spoken since. Just like I thought, he used an unknown number to call me, and I automatically answered without thinking. As soon as I heard his voice on the other end, I immediately hung up, but I didn't manage to block the number in time, so he was able to send me a text. He wrote that he knows I don't want to discuss this topic anymore. But he and Derek are in serious trouble and desperately need my help because their employer is putting pressure on them every day and threatening to sue if they don't return the money. That made me feel really guilty, but I replied that I wouldn't help and that he should really start finding other ways to return the money instead of trying to deceive his boss. Then I blocked him, and I hope he understands why I did it. Even if he doesn't, I just want him to do the right thing and avoid ending up in jail. Update 3. So far there's been no news from my father, but my grandparents reached out to my mom's old friend, the company's CEO, to find out what he's planning to do. We hadn't contacted him before because he's a busy man, and we didn't want to push too much, But we needed to know how things were going since talking to my father or Derek no longer made sense. My grandfather spoke with him, and the director said that he still plans to press charges if the money isn't returned within the next couple of months. He said he's willing to overlook the crime out of respect for his friendship with my mother, but he cannot forgive the debt. And honestly, I respect his decision. He's being far more lenient than most people would be in his place. He even apologized to me and said he was sorry that I had to go through all of this. But I told him it wasn't really a big problem for me since I no longer live with my father, and frankly, my father deserves it. We don't know what will happen next, but I think my father is smart enough to realize that he really needs to find a way to pay the money back if he doesn't want to end up in prison. It'll take some time, but I'm sure they'll figure it out, and I have nothing to worry about. I also had a long conversation with my mom's friend, and he told me that before she passed away, she talked to him and asked him to give me a chance to work for him someday, maybe as an intern. He agreed without hesitation. It's nice to know that, and I'll definitely keep it in mind for the future. Even after her death, my mom continues to take care of me, and that truly makes me happy. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you think about this whole story. Personally, I completely agree with the author here, but honestly, I might have told that friend, the boss, about how my father and Derek plan to use me in such a disgusting way. Maybe that's too harsh though. Anyway, thank you for watching this video until the end. Check out our previous videos right here, subscribe to our channel for more stories like this in the future, and good luck!